What is one rule that was implemented in your school or work that backfired horribly? Story 1. My old job had a draconian attendance policy, in which if you were a second late, you got a half-point demerit. If you were an hour late, you got that same half-point demerit. Demerits accrued: 3 equals verbal warning, 4 equals written, either 5 or 6 was termination. In addition to making for some anxiety-filled employees that made dumb decisions to speed through snowstorms, it also meant if you got stuck in a traffic jam, you might as well just take your time, stop for gas, get breakfast, etc. Same place also had a similar policy that assured the plague spread through the whole place. Say you came to work at 7. By 9 a.m., you've got a fever and full-blown flu symptoms. If you clock out then, you get a whole point demerit. But if you sit there coughing and shivering and infecting your coworkers for another 2 hours till your shift was over, you only get a half-point demerit. The sickness policy is shockingly dumb. If everyone gets sick because one person couldn't leave, then productivity goes down a huge amount, if not shutting down operations entirely until enough people are healthy again. I'm surprised that wasn't revoked after the first time, but some managers can't manage anything. Story 2. My senior year of high school, we got moved into a new school building across from a grocery store. The buildings put walls up over the plumbing for water fountains by accident, so there was a huge increase in reusable water bottles, and the school put up a vending machine entirely full of water. Now, I suppose it's time to mention that this was in Washington State, where you can sell liquor in grocery stores along with anything else. So some freshmen got the bright idea to start stealing vodka from the store across the street, fill disposable water bottles with it, and sell it to other students. This caused a huge problem with a large population of drunk underclassmen wandering the halls of the school and getting into trouble. Finally, the staff got together for a meeting about what to do. Someone suggested banning water bottles. So now students had no access to water during school hours, and everyone was enraged. There were articles written about it and parents complaining. People all over town were talking about how we had a ban on water. They eventually lifted the ban, and the vodka problem resumed. Too long didn't read. My school had kids selling booze in water bottles and banned water. Is that ban even allowed? Water feels like one of those rights that schools should more or less have to allow you. It can't possibly be permitted by any state's regulations for a school to entirely cut off access to the availability of water. Given how much water children are recommended to drink per day, going an entire school day without it wouldn't be good for you. I honestly expected that the backfire would be the school being forced to call the builders back in order to install the water fountains properly, which honestly is exactly what they should have done in the first place. Granted, with how underfunded schools can be in some areas, I'm not sure if the fault for that lies on the school themselves or the governing bodies above them. Either way, a mistake like that never should have been ignored. Story 3. In my dorm, if you did something that triggered the smoke or fire alarm, you had to do a safety presentation for everyone on your floor. This was intended to deter pranksters from pulling the alarm. A guy on our floor was making grilled cheese in the kitchenette and burned it, which legitimately triggered the fire alarm. Afterwards, he explained, assuming that since it had been a legitimate alarm and not a prank, that he wouldn't have to do a presentation. He was, of course, wrong. So the next Wednesday night, the entire floor assembled, and we were treated to a 30-minute safe presentation on the dangers of grilled cheese sandwiches. It contained literally nothing about fire safety. It was all choking hazards and cholesterol. Our RA was furious, but the student pointed out that the write-up that he'd been given just said safety presentation. We didn't get any more presentations after that. What kind of power-crazed RA does that? He also tried to implement a mandatory spades tournament. Story 4. My 4 years of high school were full of my school trying out new policies and procedures to use in the future. My sophomore year, my school decided to make tests count for 100% of a grade and homework count for 0%, but it was still assigned. And as you'd expect, kids did absolutely no homework. The ones that didn't retain information well, or were bad test takers, struggled pretty hard to make the grade without homework padding it. Our failure rate was pretty high that year. Then, my junior year, they brought homework grades back and made a new rule that there were no due dates, nor penalties for turning in late work for your 6 weeks. We didn't do quarters. As long as it was before the next 6 weeks started, you were good. This led to students doing no homework until the last few days of the 6 weeks, and teachers had to accept and grade them all before grades were due. This put teachers under immense stress by causing them to work insane hours and spend every hour at home grading, which made them very irritable and more likely to just shove pointless activities and busy work at us until they could finish grading. A lot of this falls on the school, but the students definitely aren't blameless. Teachers are overworked and underpaid enough already, without students intentionally making their jobs harder. Likewise, homework is what helps you retain the information you learn in class. If you aren't doing any, then you can't really assume you failed the test because you're a bad test taker. You failed because you went out of your way not to learn what you needed to know. Obviously, I'm not defending the school. These are egregiously dumb policies. The school probably thought they would work because some university courses make it impossible to pass the course without passing the tests as well. If you think high schoolers have it rough with that policy, try doing it with a perpetual hangover. Story 5. I worked for a place that did RMA repairs on PCs. Most of our clients were businesses, like hospitals and factories. Anyway, as I was touring the workshop during my orientation, the guy taking me around took me to a QA department. Once all builds or repairs are made, they're sent to the quality assurance department for a final inspection before going out to the customer. The guy jokingly said, "We used to pay the QA guys bonuses for every mistake they found on a build." I started laughing. The only problem was, it wasn't a joke. They actually paid bonuses to the QA people who found mistakes on builds. For anyone not familiar with the internal workings of a PC, it could take less than 3 seconds to completely render a computer inoperable. Hell, you could loosen a connection just by inspecting it. Luckily, the policy ended before I was hired. I mean, can you imagine giving someone a bonus for finding screw-ups when it would take almost no effort to make a screw-up and then claim you found it? I'd bet you literally $1,000 that every guy working at that company when the policy was lifted is now a member of the anti-work subreddit. Because if you aren't allowed to get paid extra for doing nothing, it's the system that's broken. Story 6. You now need 40 hours of community service to graduate. It's recommended that all freshmen do 10 hours a year, while the seniors start as soon as possible to get the 40 hours out of the way. The rule was gone the day before graduation, because they would have had less than a 10% graduation rate that year, and it would have made the school look terrible. They did this to try to increase their reputation of being a good school. All the other schools in the area are trash, though, so I really don't know why. My school implemented the 40 volunteer hour rule when I was in high school, too, except the way they did it was that the incoming seniors, my class, had to do 10, the class below is 20, next class 30, and the incoming freshmen would have to complete 40 by graduation. That way they avoided that situation you described, and as far as I know, the 40-hour rule is still in place. The reason it's in place at the second commenter school, but not the first's, is because the second school did it in a remotely intelligent fashion, using basic math. The kind of math you'd expect the staff of an educational facility to be capable of doing. Story 7. I'm a programmer. On a previous job, the developers and teams were measured by the number of feature requests they completed. We figured out to subdivide everything to blow it up into the maximum number of feature requests possible. A manager might request a new report. We've set up separate feature tickets for create button, make button blue, make button respond when clicked, implement business logic, display results in grade, allow sorting of grid, and so on. We'd subdivide a one-day task into 21-hour tasks. Management loved it. Our team looked 20 times as productive, despite deliberately slowing ourselves down with red tape. So accurate it hurts. Especially the management loved it part. Yes, because every feature is equal and requires the same effort and resources. I love people who think that way. Did this company happen to be located in a place called Lazy Town? Was the manager's name Robbie Rotten? Because I literally cannot think of anyone else in history who would put this much time and effort into accomplishing as little as possible. Story 8. New manager got rid of the sofa in the break room so people couldn't nap on their hour-long lunch break. No one overslept or anything, but it was good to have the option on a tough day. Stoner guy started sleeping in other places, including in between walls and in the warehouse. That's when we started losing him, and couldn't find him, as he'd go into a deeper sleep and was less likely to be disturbed. He didn't lose his job somehow. That place had a hard time hiring. To clarify where Stoner guy would go, we'd find him in between walls and shelves. It was a DIY store that had been something else years before, so there were random partition walls and oddly laid out shelving units everywhere. A real poop show with a store layout. He had quite a few places to hide in and nap. The place had a hard time hiring because they got rid of the sofa. Please like and subscribe if you've made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of this video and have a wonderful day. Story 9. We got a new manager for our office. She was an outside hire and was trying to prove herself quickly, and she was obsessed with efficiency. So her first week here, she sent out this very rudely worded email about employees eating at our desks. We have a very small break area, 4 tables, and we have about 300 employees here, and that we all had to stop eating at our desks because, quote, it was not efficient to eat and try to work at the same time. Through a coordinated effort by some of the sassier people at the office, they all had their lunches at the same time and filled the break room with about 90 people. Elbow to elbow, and they all ate standing up. Literally the next day after that happened, she sent out a follow-up email saying that we could eat at our desks, but she advised us to take a break from our work from time to time. It was pretty funny. Story 10. My senior year of high school, some guy in my class got an in-school suspension for wearing a headband. He had long, curly hair, so the next couple weeks, almost every guy on the football team started wearing headbands in protest. Keep in mind that girls could wear headbands, just not guys. No one really understood this rule. This took place right in the middle of football season. Did the rule get removed after the protest? It did. They tried suspending a couple of the guys on the football team, but as with most places, football was so important they couldn't suspend everyone because this took place right in the heart of football season. So they eventually gave up. It's dumb to have different rules for the men and women in the first place, especially when it comes to accessories like headbands. Although I have to wonder if they would have been equally reticent to suspend everyone if it had been the band or orchestra as opposed to the football team, because it really shouldn't matter if it was football season or not. Any rule that requires you to suspend a huge chunk of your school population is probably a bad rule. And if it's not a bad rule, it reflects on how badly you're managing student behavior. Either way, it winds up making the school look pretty bad. Story 11. Not sure if it was exactly a rule, but my middle school once encouraged kids to not touch each other at all to reduce physical harassment cases, even friendly gestures among friends. To add insult to injury, they did it twice as often in front of the admin who made the presentation about it. Hey Jack, high five. Physical harassment. Our middle school banned high fives when I was in 8th grade for being disruptive, so everyone switched to the most obnoxious high elbow as possible. Story 12. If you return a library book late, your parents will have to return it and explain why it's late. It worked about as well as you'd think. The rule lasted a few months before they figured it wasn't worth the cost of replacing all the books. Kid. I can't return this book. Parent. Why not? Kid. It's late. Parent. So? Kid. School says you have to do it and tell them why I didn't return it on time. Parent. Oh, well, I guess they aren't getting it back, are they? How in the name of our sweet baby Jesus did it take a few months for those people to find out that it was not worth it? Story 13. This was actually in the news a couple of months ago. We had a really hot summer last year, and the boys at my little brother's secondary school were mad that they couldn't wear shorts, but the girls could wear skirts. The junior leadership team brought it up at a meeting, and the head teacher jokingly went, "All right, if the boys want to wear skirts, then let them." A group of boys went to school wearing skirts the next day. Then it wasn't just a group of them. And that, children, is how Scotland was born. 2 things. First of all, I wish I lived in this OP's town. Not because they do things like this, but because crime and political corruption must be at an all-time low for this story to have made the news. Second, overheating is a legitimate health concern. The students brought this up, and the head's response was to laugh and joke about it. How does this person become a head teacher anywhere other than in Matilda? Story 14. At a former job, software development, there was a foosball table. People would play reasonably often, but just one game to take a break. One day, management came down to the software engineering floor and saw people playing foosball in the middle of the afternoon. They declared no foosball until 4:30 p.m. That ended up making it so that everybody knows when there would be other people waiting to play foosball, so it was much easier to find somebody willing to play and significantly increased the amount of foosball played at work. I just love the idea of management supplying a foosball table, then getting upset because people were using the foosball table. The saddest part is that even though I've literally never heard a story like this before, it somehow feels like this kind of thing might actually happen pretty often. It's not hard to imagine a management team wanting to look like a fun office without actually wanting to be one. Story 15. My middle school had a no touching rule, which meant you'd get suspended for high-fiving a friend. Girls got in trouble for hugging their friends. Our teachers thought this was ridiculous and would have students high-five each other in their classes for a minute every day. So many kids got suspensions that the rule stopped being enforced and only counted if you touched a kid in a bullying situation or with harassment. Story 16. My high school made students wear these neon t-shirts that read "dress code violator" if their outfit didn't adhere to the school's policy. But they became so popular, the school began selling them 1 week later. So, mission accomplished. Some school funding? I suppose it still accomplished the school's goal with the added benefit of making money. Maybe it didn't backfire. Maybe this was their goal all along. Story 17. My high school told my senior class, "No senior pranks or none of you walk." Results? We didn't throw a prank. Instead, we threw the biggest rager of the year on school property with the permission of the county sheriff, as long as we, quote, took our bottles with us when we finished. The sheriff retired the next week. He was the real one. Aftermath, the administration was ticked off as heck, but couldn't pin it on the senior class because Sheriff Rick couldn't remember what kids were there. Unless this was such a remarkably tiny school that literally everyone participated in the senior prank, they never would have been able to make good on their threat anyway. Trying to keep innocent kids from walking because of what others did would not go over well with their parents. It only takes a few kids whose parents can supply alibis for them, and this is something I'd bet at least a few of the pranksters could even get, to make a story out of this that would make the school look awful. Never make a threat until you've considered the consequences of having to carry it out if anyone calls your bluff. This easily could have been solved without a corrupt sheriff's help. Law enforcement's getting a bad enough rap these days already, without a sheriff turning a blind eye to underage drinking. Story 18. A school in my area jacked up the cost of the parking pass. People protested by not buying the pass. Instead, they rode the bus. Funny thing is, the county really relies on juniors and seniors driving because they don't have enough buses for all the students. The parking pass fee dropped. People drove again. Don't ever let them tell you driving to school is a privilege. They need you to drive to school. Now that's a lesson in economics. Story 19. High school took all the stall doors off the boys' bathrooms because of graffiti or something. So I started pooping in the bathroom near the office. After a couple of times of the superintendent coming in while I was doing that, all the doors were put back on. Maintain eye contact and nod as the superintendent walks by. "What's up, Mr. S? Got any good reading material?" Story 20. The school I attended emailed the entire student body to not use Yik Yak because students were being bullied on it. All of the students, myself included, who hadn't heard of the app immediately downloaded it and began using it. I just like that people were being bullied on social media, and the school's solution was not to address the bullies or to teach the victims how a block button works, but to simply discourage people from using social media at all. In my day, bullies did their jobs manually. So if I'm being bullied at school, should I stop going to school? Because that's pretty much the same logic. It's terrifying how many of these stories involve the staff at high schools failing to utilize basic concepts that most of us learned at a much younger age. If you live in Texas or Florida, then I guess crazy educators are at least pretty much expected at this point. But all you other states have no excuse. Please leave your stories in the comments. I'd love to make a video of them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.